Welcome back, everybody, and happy Monday, April 14th, 2025. Born on this date in 1938, pay equality activist Lilly Ledbetter of Possum Trot. She passed away just last year. Today's a convergence of a few big moments. The Jewish celebration of Passover began Saturday evening, and we're near the front end of the Christian Holy Week. Palm Sunday was yesterday, and Easter is coming up this Sunday. Let's see, it's also National Pecan Day. Celebrate it by pronouncing it the right way. Also, and I know everybody's excited about this one, it's National Ex-Spouse Day. A Missouri preacher back in the 80s made this one up in hopes that forgiveness could take the place of anger and resentment. Of course, it could be seen as a chance to go the gift route and disappoint her one last time. Just don't go all out if you have a current spouse. That wouldn't be good. Today, we have Capitol reporter Mike Cason on the show to set up the home stretch of the 2025 legislative session. First, we have a notice that went out to some registered voters that they'll need to get squared away. We have the DOJ backing out of an agreement it says is to DEI, and why a few hundred people spent the night in planes in Montgomery. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
You may have recently received a notice from the Alabama Secretary of State's office because the notice said you may have moved. AL.com's Mike Cason reports that nearly 500,000 Alabamians did receive that notice. It asks those who receive the notices to respond within 90 days. Otherwise, you could have to update your registration and, after the 2028 general election, have it canceled. The state is trying to identify voters who may have moved out of the state and those who have moved into an area where they'd use a different voting place. It's another way to try to maintain accurate voter rolls. The system they're using identifies possible movers through the post office's National Change of Address file, as well as the credit bureau Experian's True Trace system. Now, some groups have criticized the use of the Experian database because they say there are multiple reasons that addresses there may not jibe with your actual current address. The Secretary of State's office provided links to a study from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission on the use of Experian and other counties and states that also use that same database. The U.S. Department of Justice is backing off a settlement with the state of Alabama over sewage issues in Lowndes County, reports AL.com's Margaret Cates. The sewage and septic problems in the area made big news in recent years, as a combination of factors have made solutions difficult and expensive, and led to some residents straight piping their waste into their yards. The EPA launched investigations into wastewater in Alabama's Black Belt and whether civil rights violations were occurring. In 2023, the DOJ and Alabama Department of Public Health reached an agreement in the case. The DOJ would suspend the investigation, and the state would make significant changes, including the suspension of criminal penalties for those below-code solutions. The DOJ ended the agreement in a release that said, quote, "The DOJ will no longer push environmental justice as viewed through a distorting DEI lens," end quote. Now here I'll read from a statement by the Alabama Department of Public Health. The installation of sanitation systems and related infrastructure is outside the authority or responsibilities conferred upon ADPH by state law. Nonetheless, ADPH will continue working with subgrantees on installation of septic systems as contemplated by the interim resolution agreement until appropriated funding expires. After that time, ADPH will support and be available to provide technical assistance to other organizations that may choose to engage in this work. Now, surely somebody in our audience has been stuck in Montgomery longer than you intended. And then maybe there was gridlock on I-85. Maybe the Biscuits went extras at Riverwalk Stadium. Well, it turns out it could have been worse. You could have been one of the 300 some odd Delta passengers who had to spend this past Thursday night on the Montgomery Regional Tarmac. 2 flights from Mexico, one from Cabo San Lucas and one from Mexico City, were on their way to a layover in Atlanta when weather forced them to be diverted to Montgomery. Complicating their evening was that Montgomery doesn't have customs, which means the passengers couldn't exit the plane for hours. After 5 a.m. Friday, arrangements were made to bring the passengers into the airport under guard until they were able to finally depart later that morning. Well, the trade association Manufacture Alabama has named its coolest thing made in Alabama for 2025, reports AL.com's John R. Roby. And the honoree is Boeing's Patriot Advanced Capability 3 Seeker. Now, that's a component that allows Patriot interceptors to identify, track, and put down threats such as enemy aircraft or ballistic or cruise missiles. And a home in Birmingham Shoal Creek area is on the market for $92 a square foot. Now, before you drop everything and drive over, though, you need to know how many square feet we're talking about. AL.com's Amber Sutton reports that the home is Alabama's largest and 44th largest in the U.S., coming in at 54,000 square feet. The total asking price is a mere $5 million. There are a 25-person theater, a 10-car garage, a wine cellar, 12 grand fireplaces, 15 bedrooms, and 22 bathrooms, although if you buy it, you still can be in only one room at a time. We're going to take a quick break and then talk with Mike Cason about what our state lawmakers have done and might still do before time runs out in the session. Y'all stay with us.
There's a good chance you're dealing with a middleman, like me, when you get your medicines. That's because PBMs and insurers are often the same company. We even own big chain pharmacies and are buying your doctor's office. We decide what medicines you can get, where you get them, and how much you pay. It's a win-win. For me.
When middlemen own it all, you lose. Visit phrma.org/middlemen to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
The NBA playoffs are here, and I'm getting my bets in on FanDuel. Talk to me, Chuck GPT. What do you know?
All sorts of interesting stuff, even Charles Barkley's greatest fear.
Hey, nobody needs to know that.
New customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. 21 plus and present in Virginia. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. As the Alabama State Legislative Session hits its home stretch, we thought it would be a good time to bring in the eyes and the ears of AL.com at the state capitol, Mike Cason. Welcome back to the Down in Alabama studio, Mike.
Great to be here, Ike. I really appreciate your interest.
Thanks for taking time out. I know you're a busy man this time of year. How many working days do we have left in this session?
We've got 9 days left, 9 out of 30, so they're 70% done.
So 3 weeks, thereabouts.
Right. They have to be done by May 19th. That's the latest, the last day they can meet. The Constitution limits them to 15 weeks, 105 days. So that would be the last possible day. And they'll go close to that probably.
Now, what do you think? If the Constitution didn't limit them, would would they be down there for 6 months? How do you think that would play out?
I don't know. Some of them would probably enjoy that, but a lot of them probably would not. So I don't know how that would play out.
Yeah, they have tomatoes to put in the ground and stuff to do at home, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, what do we see coming up the rest of the way? Are there any April surprises looming somewhere in that leaky old building?
I I don't know of any surprises coming up. I think Senator Garland Gudger, the president pro tem of the Senate, he put the lottery gambling question pretty much to bed when he said it's not happening this session, and it won't happen unless he can stop it. The reason he's doing that is because it doesn't have the votes.
He figured that would clear the table for higher priorities this time around.
Yeah, looking back at the governor's State of the State speech, which is kind of a good starting point because she works closely with the Republican majority that controls everything, and they do some things independent of her, but a lot of things they're lined up on. They've passed some of the stuff that she proposed or that she advocated for, and some of the stuff still in the process. A big one that's still in the process is the bill to restrict cell phones in schools.
Oh yeah,
they call that the Focus Act, and the idea is that cell phones in school are disrupting learning, that students that causes bullying and just general disruption, even mental health problems, and a lot of school systems have already taken care of that, but apparently some have not, and so they want a state law saying every system has to have a policy that students have to have their cell phones turned off and in a locker or some kind of storage place during class. And of course, there's some exceptions in there for emergencies.
Yeah, my question to that was why not leave it up to the schools? I guess when you have a state law, it sort of backs the play of schools that want to get rid of the cell phones.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the state superintendent has said most systems are handling this, but I believe he's supportive of a bill. So I guess they think it's better to make sure that school systems are doing this. I guess they think it's important enough, as far as student learning and so forth, to make it mandatory to have a policy.
Yeah, it's a good point knowing the state superintendent's behind it.
Yeah, I think he's generally well regarded.
Well, what about some of these immigration pieces? It seemed like there were several that were stirring about. What's going on there?
Yeah, and that's one the governor didn't advocate for any specific bills. She just said, we want to support President Trump as much as we can in his policies. But then the Republican lawmakers came out with 4 or 5 bills, and some have sort of run into problems. There was one that was going to put a 4% fee on people who transfer cash out of the country. And the idea was that you have a lot of people here working for cash under the table, not paying taxes, sending money back to their home country. And this was to capture some revenue from them. And that bill seems pretty much to have stalled. I was in a committee meeting this week where several Republican lawmakers just didn't like the idea and said, they said things like, what about are we going to run off our migrant workers who are working on our farms? A lot of these people are here doing important jobs that others won't do, and that yes, some of them are using those wire transfers, but they're using them. They're not nothing wrong with it. They're relying on it. And then one legislator even said, "Well, my family has a relative who's a missionary in Africa, and he said we sent her money, that way, and our family's done that for years." So anyway, that idea seems to have stalled. It still has time to pass, but it had some opposition. And then there was another one that was going to make it a crime to shield or conceal somebody in the country illegally. And that bill was really trimmed down to where it doesn't cover. It would have been covered things like if you gave an illegal immigrant a ride and you knew they were in the country illegally, you could potentially violate the law. A lot of that was taken out. It still says it creates the crime of human smuggling, and it says if you transport somebody across the state line that you know is in the country illegally,
Right.
that's felony, and that's run into some opposition too. In a public hearing this week, there was a gentleman from Wedowee, which is on the Georgia-Alabama line, who's an advocate for immigrants, and he said sometimes we have to take people over to the hospital in Hamilton, Georgia, because our hospital is so small. And he said, we would be, we would be subject to that. So anyway, it has not been smooth sailing for some of those immigration bills. Not to say that none of them will pass, but they're getting some scrutiny.
Yeah, it seems like it's rife with gray areas and unintended consequences holding them back.
Yeah.
Has the 2025 legislature earned a legacy yet? I mean, looking back at what's already been done, how are we going to see this session?
Well, I think a lot of people will remember that they didn't deal with the lottery bill. But, I don't want to be all negative. They didn't. Not that we have been all negative, but they've passed some things that are pretty popular that are, probably good ideas. They passed a parental leave bill for state employees and teachers where, 8 weeks of paid parental leave if you have a baby. That was something that the governor was supportive of and proposed. Something you would think we would have already had in place, but we didn't.
Yeah, that's just keeping pace with private businesses.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Finally, yeah.
They banned Glock switches, which were already illegal under federal law, but law enforcement has increasingly talked about how that's really causing a lot of public safety problems. And the Glock switches were used in that horrific shooting in 5 Points in Birmingham.
That's right.
Months ago.
They've already made a couple of arrests that local police have touted. We made this arrest because we knew that we could prosecute it here.
Right. And they're also considering some tax cuts. These have passed the House. They haven't gone to the Senate yet, but the 1% reduction in the food tax and the state sales tax on food, 1% would knock it down to 2%.
Right, from the state, yeah.
Yeah. And there some changes to the state income tax that would save taxpayers about $25 million a year. And then some changes to if you draw money, if you're 65 or older and draw money out of your 401k or IRAs, pretty good tax break on that, increasing the amount of that's exempt from from taxes.
That would have passed way over my head a few years ago. I wouldn't have cared. I'm starting to care a little more and a little more about those future things.
I'm directly affected.
Do we need to do a PSA real quick telling people to not send pornography in the mail? What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, that was crazy.
There's charges now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the legislators received pornographic images in the mail. Apparently, one of them said because of the what was it? The age verification requirement that the state put into effect last year, and they get these images, and now there are charges levied. Just folks, here's the PSA. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not just saying that to brag, but I wouldn't advise sending porn in the mail any more than I'd advise sending Xanax.
Yeah, apparently they put their name and a return address on it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Name and a P.O. box.
Yeah, that's something else. What else is going on in Montgomery, Mike, that we need to know about?
Well, there's the Ten Commandments issue that's come up again. That's
Oh, that's right.
Perennial issue in Alabama, or at least off and on. And
yeah,
I think there's a feeling that the federal courts, the Supreme Court, are more conservative and would be more likely to uphold some law requiring Ten Commandments displays in schools. So that's probably got a good chance to pass. There's a bill in each house, and they're both in position to move. They've gotten committee approval. So they would require public schools to have a Ten Commandments display in the library or entry, or the lobby or some common area.
Okay.
And the bills are real specific. They spell out sort of historical statements, making the case that the Ten Commandments has historical value, and it would be the statements would include some quotes from the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and I think a quote by John Quincy Adams that sort of makes the case for this is part of our history, and it's appropriate to have it. It's appropriate to have it in public schools. So but that's one they've sort of scaled back, because originally it applied to colleges and universities. They took that out.
Okay.
So now it would be public schools.
K-12 public schools. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Cason, as always, I appreciate you coming on and helping us out, and get your sleep this weekend, because I know you're running around during the week.
Yeah, it was a fairly challenging week this week.
All right. Thanks everybody out there for listening to us. We are going to be back here bright and early in the morning. Until then, y'all come by and see what we're doing anytime you want to on the internet at al.com.